Good evening, Burlington, Mr. and Mrs. Burlington. It is another pleasure for myself and the group that I represent. We are doing another special show. We have a very special guest this evening. I just want to mention, before we introduce the guest tonight, I just want to mention that we will have I've got 5 or 6 shows that are lined up, people that are very, very important to Burlington and Burlington's growth and Burlington's efforts, as well as some people on the, I'll give you one example. I'm hoping to have Herb Chambers on, the gentleman who owns 5 dealerships here in Burlington. Kind of interested in getting his perspective of the town of Burlington in terms of growth and how he has been part of it. That's one, and a lot of the people who literally work here in Burlington, such as my guest this evening, who is the planning director for the planning board, Kristin Kassner. And I thank you very much for coming here tonight, and I'm hoping that we can raise a level of interest in Burlington with regard to not only the growth, but exactly what is happening. And I've always had the feeling that your particular department and what you do is not only important, but almost critical. Not almost, it is critical to Burlington in so many ways, because it is the business of Burlington. It's the companies that bring in significant monies to Burlington. And I'm not talking about just the rentals, I'm talking about the people who are here, who work in Burlington and spend money here, whether it's at a restaurant or a dry cleaners or whatnot, an automobile. So you're really an extremely important person in terms of helping Burlington not only be prominent on the map, but also in terms of growth. At any rate, welcome to the show.
And well, thank you for having me, and thank you for recognizing our piece in this whole puzzle that is Burlington.
Where to begin? Why don't you tell us something about yourself? What kind of training, your department, how many people you have, and typical day?
Sure. I'll start with myself. I grew up in Winchester, just across the way. I did my undergraduate at Miami University in Ohio to get out of Massachusetts for a little while, knowing I would come back. That was eye-opening in the middle of a cornfield. But I came back. I worked in finance, doing kind of odd jobs for a little while when I graduated, as well as restaurant work and some consulting work. And anyway, then I joined the team in Burlington as an intern in December of 2002.
Wow.
So I have officially joined full-time in 2004. So I've been in Burlington for the duration, which is quite a number of years, and I've seen a lot of changes both in Burlington as well as the different departments in Burlington. I think all have been good and progressive. I became planning director in 2012, and we are so fortunate to have 2 planners in my office. Josh Morris is our senior planner, Liz Bonventry is our assistant planner, and Jen Gelinas is our clerk, who we couldn't have work a day without her. She keeps us all together. In terms of day-to-day, we're the planning department. We see everything and anything, and that's what makes it exciting to work in Burlington as a planner. You have everything from car dealerships to gravel pits to housing, to, just nail salons and restaurants and, big things with the mall and, giant kind of office complexes and campuses. So it's been interesting since I've been here. It's been ever-changing. Since I've been here. Most of what we work for the planning board, we're directly. We don't work under the town administrator. We work under the planning board. which just is an interesting dynamic. There are towns, it varies across the board, but some towns, planning staff works for the planning board, some work for the town administrator or managers. As you know, we have an elected planning board. Our planning board handles all special permits, all site plan, all subdivision. As I mentioned, they are the special permit granting board, which actually gives the planning board in Burlington a little bit of a unique position where they have more permitting in their hands singularly than many of the communities around us.
Okay.
So there's a lot of responsibilities that rest on the planning board in Burlington. Whereas other communities diversify some of the special permit granting authorities to the Board of Appeals or the Selectmen for different reasons. And it's not either way. It's not good or bad. It's just different. But it's unique to Burlington, where really the planning board has all of that authority. So I think just inherently with that, the planning board's a strong board. We spend, because of the amount of permitting and different things that happen in Burlington, we spend a lot of time permitting. We have been lucky, and I know it's taken a long time, and we're just about to complete the master plan process, but to do actual planning is something that we have to kind of fit in. One of the biggest pushes we had in 2010 to create the senior planner position.
Why lucky?
Lucky that we are so busy with permitting.
Okay.
That means there's things happening. There's things happening and changing and growing.
That's growth.
Not necessarily, I know it's not so much more developed, but we're seeing a lot of, we permit existing buildings and users to go in existing buildings.
Good activity.
Good activity. But, we, as planners, we like to plan and look at the future and what's next and make sure that we're ready for it. So, where was I? But anyway, in 2010, when town meeting was, we were fortunate enough to have town meeting approve our full-time senior planner position, which really now takes care of all of the day-to-day work. So all of the permitting day-to-day is the responsibility of the senior planner, which allows for me to do a lot of the things that we were talking about before the show with master planning, looking at kind of what's happening in the market, spending some time fostering the relationships we have in the community to really make things happen and really foster the change and evolution that we need to and be able to educate the community about what it is that we're looking at changing, educate people about what's happening around us, and do a lot of that stuff. And also educate, primarily, we work for the planning board, we're the professional staff of the planning board, to educate the planning board in terms of what's in front of them, what's the site plan in front of them, what are the regulations. The planning board is a policy arm, but we're really the professional staff that support them. But back to me, I don't think I got into it, but I started in Burlington in 2006. I got my master's degree from Tufts University in urban planning and policy.
Brava.
And I'm actually lucky enough, both of my other planners also have master's degrees in planning. So I feel fortunate that we have a strong base, an educational base with our department. And I think that just gives us, it's just a lot to work from. I mean, I think about people who work from home, and whereas it's nice to work from home, but it's fantastic to go to work and have people to, banter and ideas about, and I have a really great staff to do that. So,
do you think? Thank you. You've answered a few questions. No, that's fine. Do you think do you have much contact with the people of Burlington? Do you think they appreciate, generally speaking, I know there are always exceptions, you talk to so-and-so and they're very much aware of, for example, we were talking to Frank, a cameraman off air, and he's very much aware of planning board and what's going on. Is there enough, and this is the reason, one of the reasons that I invited you here, because I want the people, whoever is watching, I have no way of knowing how many people are watching, and I'm hoping that when they replay this program over next weekend, BCAT does, that eventually a bunch of people in Burlington will hear this so that they realize how important your particular job is. And I had no idea you were here that long. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's really great. Okay, about yourself, And I know most of your, I know, I forget her name, the young lady who works at the desk. She's terrific, very, very responsive, quick to find out exactly what. Before, I want to talk, somewhere along the way, I want to mention the forum tomorrow night. How do you attract people, or do you? How do you get the word out that Burlington is, or do you simply wait for them to contact? And how does it filter down to you? Someone from the, one of the companies makes a call to Burlington and they end up at town hall and they speak to Amy or they speak to perhaps one of the selectmen. How does it come down? How does it get filtered down to you? And if it does, what do you do? Do you say, come and we'll take a look? Or is this someone who has already looked at a piece of property and then come to you? Is there a
So I guess the main thing, rather than getting directly to if a company calls, and I'll get to that, but I mean, Burlington has been so fortunate from the beginning of when 128 was built, and you had a lot of military R&D happening along Middlesex Turnpike, along 128, Route 3 was built. So you had a lot of space that was commercial space that was created. And, I think there's been a lot of steps and decisions along the way that has really shaped Burlington into where we are today. But they're conscious decisions. There's a conscious decision to sewer Burlington and create Burlington Mall Road in the 70s, which, they were big decisions at the time, but really started to pave the way for what's next. And Leahy Clinic landed here in 1980, at least in the clinic, kind of anyway, that we know now. But there were companies that were here. We still had trucking terminals through the 80s along Middlesex Turnpike. But then certain conscious changes. I mean, the more modern history of Burlington when Sun Microsystems landed here, and the coordination that happened in order to make that happen, and the decision making and really Burlington coming together with the selectmen, the planning board, the business community, everybody kind of coming together to make that happen, put together the Plan Development District regulations, which it wasn't a single-use Sun Microsystems, but it really began to introduce the concept of computer software and technology. And those conscious decisions of Sun Microsystems brought Oracle, brought that wave of the 90s that took us through 2000. And so my point is, what we have been trying to do since I've been here at least, is how do we maintain momentum? Because if we can maintain momentum, we maintain our place, and that Burlington is a place to do business. Just in general, people want to have Burlington on their letterhead if they're looking at the suburban market in Boston. We're not competing against who wants to be downtown Boston, and I'll talk later about life science and Kendall Square. But when they get big enough where they need to expand to the suburbs, or they're looking to they're overcapitalized and they need to just pay less for space, and they need space. But anyway, so the wave of Sun Microsystems and Oracle and Microsoft and Nokia, I mean, all of that happened because of the main decisions and the momentum that came after that. What happened in 2000, and as we reached mid-2000s, there was kind of that slowing down. It was slowing down everywhere. But then we took, partnering with Nordblom and Nordblom for Northwest Park, National Development, Nordblom again eventually purchasing the Sun campus, and the Gutierrez Company for what we now is the Keurig campus. But we started that discussion about the regulatory changes and the Plan Development District in between 2006 and 2009, whereas no one was constructed. I mean, those were kind of low years in commercial development. If you remember, those were also the years where the Obama administration had the Recovery and Reinvestment Act. If you have a shovel-ready project, we'll do it. And we were fortunate at that time to be far enough along with Northwest Park to say, okay, wait, we need all these the Middlesex Turnpike redone, some of the roadways within Northwest Park, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Ave. And then there were some other state programs. But the fact that we had done so much pre-planning and put in place the regulations to allow for development when development came back online, which it did, starting probably about 2010, you start Wegmans, you start 3rd Ave, and then you start that momentum again. And the engine got turned back on, but it was only because of the pre-planning and partnerships that we had with the business, our resident business community that we're fortunate to have in Burlington. And the big thing then was how do you break up this commercial office park? I mean, Northwest Park was built between the 50s and 70s when it was, military R&D and these one-story cement block buildings with windows this big because heaven forbid, the Russians peek in.
I remember.
But, it's totally different now. People work differently now, and they want different things. They want restaurants and cafes and coffee. And I mean, for the first time, people went to Northwest Park. If you didn't work in Northwest Park, you didn't go to Northwest Park. And then they built Wegmans, and people said, I mean, it's like you unlocked a whole 127 acres of Burlington that what people really didn't experience before.
Is that the extent of 127 acres is what
is
we
Northwest Park.
in the park, right? Okay.
There are other parks, and it's same thing with the district. But those amenities created, again, the engine for now what we're looking at is companies who want to be here. I mean, Keurig looked at Northwest Park, and they ended up where they ended up in Burlington because of 3rd Ave and because of the amenities that were there. So my point is that these incremental steps that we're making seem kind of small in the increment, but these policy decisions at critical times made a huge difference in the last 30, 50, 70 years of where we are. And I think we're at that point right now. And I don't want to jump into life science too quickly if you have something else to talk about. But do you want me to?
No, your answer.
So right now we're looking at, I mean, you read every day. People work totally differently. They live differently. Millennials, do they own cars? Do they not own cars? And just there's different industries. What we do know is that life science is a booming industry in Massachusetts. Kendall Square is running out of space by the minute. And we are seeing some major moves from some major companies in life science. From within Massachusetts, from within the United States, buying companies or smaller startups in Massachusetts locating both to Kendall Square, but we're seeing companies in Norwood and Framingham, and Bedford is doing a great job attracting life science. And so we looked at it and said, okay, this is something we need to pay attention to. I mean, when you look at the office market is like, if it's not flat, it's like tiny bit up.
Yeah.
But the life science kind of lab space mixed use market is like off the charts. And we looked at it and said, what is it? What are we doing? I mean, Millipore came here, a few years ago. They're finally built out all their space. I mean, the buzz around Millipore is big in the region. However, Millipore was supposed to be the Sun Microsystems. Where's the next? Where's Oracle? So, and we said, but what's happening? What's happening here that's making it more difficult? And are there hurdles that we don't see that we should be aware of? So then, and we started this discussion with the master plan discussions as well a few years back, and it's kind of, I feel like I've been talking about life science for a year and a half or so, but you can't not talk. I mean, you can't talk about the biggest industry
if
growth
that is
in Massachusetts.
What people are looking for, you have no choice.
When really, and some of our panelists who had a conference call yesterday said that the Boston region is it. I mean, California's trying to do something, and they are doing some stuff out there that is really great and innovative. But right now, we are home base. New Jersey for life science. New Jersey's trying to kind of reinvent themselves from pharmaceuticals to life science. They're not quite there yet. So if we're home base and we're Burlington, and we are looking at an office, I mean, we have over 16 million square feet of commercial space that's primarily office space. And if office space is going like this or like this, we need to be looking at how do we diversify our space to allow for kind of life science industry. Do we have that type of space? We have a little bit of that type of space, but again, a majority of our space is more traditional office. And to looking at, can that be converted? What are the barriers there? But, and then just to the specific warrant articles, we were looking at parking ratios. Our parking ratios for lab space were just like office, which you don't have you don't have that many people in a lab that you have in a traditional office. So we had to modify it. We looked to modify that, as well as what is the actual impact of a lab space. So, and if there's a larger footprint for this type of use, is it similar, equal, or less of an impact than a traditional office space? So that's why we're looking at a floor area ratio, which allows for life science use to be a little larger than a traditional office space. And the last piece of the article is really just to address the word life science. So when you Google Burlington bylaws, that, oh, there it is, and that's how I can do it. And one of the pieces within that allows for life science by right only in the IH district, which is a high-rise district, for which we only have 3 properties. Which, anyway, but which allowing for a by right life science or biotechnology use allows us to elevate our mass biotech rating from a bronze, which we are now, to a gold status, which is gold or platinum, which all of our neighbors
Who rates?
holds.
Who does the rating?
The Mass Biotech Council.
Okay.
So, so it's a bio-ready rating for Mass Biotech, which is something, if you're a biotech company somewhere else, you look up, okay, are they friendly to biotechnology and life science? That's one of the places they look. And right now we're kind of in the bottom of the list, and we want to be at the top of the list, because, and not for every single type of life science, but, as much as we need to diversify our base of industry, we need to diversify the space that we have to do those types of industries. So that's where we are with life science.
No, you've answered a lot of the questions that I have, which is fine. 2 or 3 other things. How does Burlington fare in terms of the surrounding towns, and why has Burlington? I know there's a concatenation, if that's the correct word. One particular movement, you indicated that maybe started with Leahy, and it went on to, and then the big companies, can't even remember the name of them, but one begot another, and it became a bit of a flood. How do we fare with regard to the towns around us? You mentioned Bedford. Does Lexington, do we compete with them? And why Burlington? Is it our location? Is it the 128 corridor? Or is it simply the businesses that are here that are now attracting? Because there's a kind of relationship between these, especially life science, that, you're doing this aspect of it and we're doing this aspect of it. And there's usually a kind of I don't want to say a connection, but maybe they cross over in terms of their research. They cover one another. So one company is here and another company may be looking at the fact they want to come to Burlington because this other company is here, as well as Burlington, just outside of Boston, is great. You indicated the growth, which is very important. How do we stand in terms of the towns around? Does anyone compete with us, or do we compete with anyone for attracting a company? And how does a company locate, or how does a company contact, and who do they contact if they're looking for space here? Do they come looking on their own, or do they call and say, do you have some space? We don't advertise as of yet, is my understanding.
Right, so we compete primarily with Lexington, Waltham, and Bedford.
Okay.
There's some larger places we compete with, but if you're looking in this area, those are kind of our, in Waltham I know is an outlier, but so Lexington and Bedford. The one thing I didn't say that I should have said earlier is that everything that's in this warrant article for life science, you can do today. It's just there's some hurdles in order to between parking and floor area ratio and are we attracting companies? I mean, just as I mentioned with Leahy and Leahy's expansion, Leahy being here, but then even more with Leahy's expansion a couple of years ago, that we've had a strong medical device segment of in Burlington, which has been fantastic. We did have a company called Conformis, which did partial knee replacement. They moved to Bedford.
Medical device, we have specific companies that do that? I should know that.
Medical device is a strong component of Burlington's
Is that the name
base.
of the company, or is that?
No, just in general,
it's
that
a field.
segment.
Okay.
We have LeMaitre, who does heart stents. We have Conformis, who did partial knee replacements. They have now moved. They moved to Bedford, and now actually they moved to Billerica. And the point I want to make there is Bedford and Billerica they have strong economic development departments, which I think Burlington does economic development. However, because of just the general workload permitting, as well as just the relationship between the selectmen and the planning board, whereas staff works for the planning board, I think economic development has been, in terms of, to your question of who do you call, who's the point person, and who kind of directs people to the right place. I mean, oftentimes, we do field a lot of calls about companies who want to come in. We guide them through, we try to figure out what their issues are.
When you say we, is that you?
Myself and my department. We work pretty cohesively as a team. If it's not me, it's someone in my department. I mean, I kind of operate in just general management of everybody should know how to do everybody's job to a certain point. And then you hand it off if you have to, but it's not, there's no one in my office will ever say that's not my job, I can't help you. It's, let me take the
Parenthetically, Josh has been with you for a while.
Josh has been with almost 6 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Josh has been
So
great.
you're a team. All of you.
And Liz has been 3 years.
Okay.
And Jen has been 12 years. So
12 years?
Yeah, I have a fantastic, my office is fantastic. But anyway, to field the calls, so if a company wants to come in, what is it that they're looking for? We don't have a listing of open space that's available in the office the commercial market and office markets, but we do have close relationships with many of the development community and the brokers who manage those spaces. So we try to put people in contact with with people in Burlington to try to find different spaces. But I think it would be very helpful to have another person that somehow works between kind of the administrative office and with the planning board to kind of be that point person to manage, okay, if you have a Board of Health issue, go over here. If you have building, go over here. What we developed about 8 years ago was a development coordination meeting, which brings together all of the development review departments, which include building, engineering, conservation, Board of Health, fire, police, as well as Board of Selectmen, or mostly the town administrator.
Can you call that what again?
That's a development coordination meeting.
Okay.
That's been amazing to keep people on the same page, figure out
Is that
what's
still active?
Yep,
Is that something?
it's every other Tuesday.
Really?
Yes.
I had no idea. That's wonderful.
No, it's been great, and it's been neat. If with this much going on, if you don't sit around and talk about, okay, what's going on, who's in front of us, what are the issues with construction going on, and who's calling, what are they looking for? Those meetings have been one of the best things I think that has happened in Burlington since I've been there, and I think in every aspect, the more we can communicate with each other, the better. And that's my point about the role. If there was a role of someone between kind of all the departments to help manage that communication and facilitate that communication, as much as we do try to fill that role just by working under the planning board structurally, it's just the way it is. And that's why I said before we started that I think that kind of economic development role has been shared quite a bit with the Board of Selectmen administration and the planning department, but we need to really figure out how to cohesively put that together.
Have you been able to propose that particular position, that coordinating position, someone who can bring the different departments together?
So we've talked about it quite a bit. We talked about it through the master plan process, and the selectmen are talking about it right now. So I look forward to continued discussion with them in just terms of how that position is structured. but I know that they are thinking about it potentially as soon as this budget season.
So getting back to the question that I had posed, Bedford and Lexington are the obvious, I don't want to call it competition, maybe it is competition, but their growth is considerable, as is ours. How much space do we have left? It seems to me, in view of what's happening at Sears, in view of what's happening at 19 and a half, I just wonder, and I mean, I've lived in Burlington a long time, and I've seen buildings, and I'm just wondering how much space is there? Do companies leave?
Yes.
Small companies, they
Well,
do.
as I just said, Conformist was here. They left. They left to Bedford.
Yeah, but that's
and
only
then,
one. I'm
but
talking.
I know, but there's a lot
That's
of
one.
them. I mean, Diex just left, which is a big company that was in.
Do you know why? Do they tell you why, or do you get a
Well,
feeling for why?
I mean, one of the things that we try to get as much control of, but we'll never have control of, is that, you know, we're lucky enough to have some companies that, you know, we like to try to embrace the whole life cycle of companies. You know, they're a small company and 5,000 square feet, and then they're a bigger you know, because if we embrace when they get here through their evolution, they're more likely to stay here. But what also happens is, you know, these companies are really attractive. They're really attractive to other larger companies that might be elsewhere in the country. And, you know, their technology or their company itself gets bought out. And you know, it's an aspect that we are aware, and that we try to make a case for why you should stay here, why it's important to be here if you get bought out. I mean, if you get bought out from a company way far away, we might not control it. But, you know, that's part of the messaging, though, that we try to think about in terms of the importance of having people
In one
close together.
sense, that is what happened to, oh, God, my memory. The name of the company that was in Bedford that moved here, big company, they just built in the so-called pit. They make filters for blood. It'll come to me, I'm sorry, I can't think of it. They just moved, and you mentioned them earlier.
LeMaitre? I
Pardon me?
mentioned LeMaitre earlier, but I don't know if that's what you're talking
It'll
about.
come to me.
But
Anyway,
companies will move in and move out. I mean,
Yeah.
but the reasons they move in and move out, one of the things that Lexington and Bedford does a lot of marketing that we're close to Burlington. We don't want a company to go to Bedford and use all of our amenities and not get the tax base and get all the
Right.
traffic. So, I mean, you know, we're a little bit in competition with Bedford, but Bedford doesn't have Third Ave, but Crosby Drive's right up the street. So, you know, we are very conscious of the companies that are up at the Exchange in Bedford. You know, who's up there? Why are they there? Was it there wasn't space available here? And we've talked to some life science companies that are like, we want to build here, but we can't for these certain reasons. And if not, we'll go to Bedford, because Bedford, you know, they either have a higher floor area ratio or no floor area ratio, and some other just other regulatory tools that allow it a little bit easier to locate there.
The amount of space that we have available to vacant areas that can be sold is changing all the time. Company may move, and in general, I mean, you know, it seems to me, and from my own perspective, what I've seen in Burlington is continual growth, and now everyone is aware of the fact that that part of the turnpike and the development on the Middlesex Turnpike has exploded, as opposed to the residential. Well, the residential has grown too, but it seems to me that there is, the picture I get is that we're giving up space for the most part. In other words, we're filling up more than we're losing. Is there space available? Is there still growth available?
Yes, but the story of Burlington is almost entirely redevelopment. I mean, if you look at Northwest Park was single-story cement block buildings, or maybe two-story. You know, what happens next? Is it their 4 buildings become one 4-story building? So I mean, it's not what do we have on the ground now, and the answer is always going to be we have to have more to accommodate
Right.
what we do next. It's how do we keep our buildings full? How do we keep the buildings that are obsolete? How do we kind of
redo them.
rebuild
Refer-
in a way that we want to rebuild to ensure that we don't have too many negative, or we don't have negative impacts to our neighborhoods or roadways. And then there are some areas that we have permitted buildings that are not yet built. Sun Microsystems, Network Drive campus, not Sun, but there's a 250,000 square foot building that's permitted, not yet built, on one of the pads up there. On the corner of 4th Ave next to Lifetime Fitness, we have almost a 300,000 square foot building, permitted, unbuilt. Next to Keurig, we have 120,000 square foot building, or 80. 100.
So bottom line is we do
So
have.
there's some buildings that, and what we're seeing now is some interest in having this conversation of, okay, I permitted a traditional office building. What happens if I want to diversify that into an office building that may accommodate some of what we're talking about kind of these more laboratory R&D spaces that need a much different level of HVAC equipment, floor to ceiling heights, so how are we rethinking those that are already permitted? But in general, I mean, we don't have all this open land to be rebuilding, and neither does Bedford and Lexington. So I think our stories are similar in terms of what we're looking for.
That's precisely the feeling that I have. We don't have that kind of open land. However,
No.
even going up, I have no doubt that in the future. Taking a bit of a turn, when you have a company that has contacted you or contacted someone in town and they are ready to move in and you're aware of the fact that they are life science. By the way, why all of a sudden life science?
Why all of a sudden
feeling? I mean,
the term?
you can't have a. I mean, it was all technology for many, many years. Now all of a sudden, everything is life science. The pieces that they're making, the apparatus that they're making for life science, the medication itself, the research itself, it's all life science. I don't know when that corner was turned. I don't know how. I guess it just took on its own life. There's really no way of knowing.
Well, I mean, you had a decade or so, key scientific discoveries that opened up a whole new level of personalized medicine, rare disease therapies. I mean,
yeah.
If you have, all of a sudden you have gene therapy because we can map our genes. And
right.
I urge everyone, because I'm not a life science professional, to come to our forum tomorrow night at 6 in the main hearing room, because we do have a fantastic forum of industry professionals. So that's an excellent question to ask the forum, why now, why life science? But I mean, I think really from, scientific discovery, all of a sudden there's a whole new, we once had a pharmaceutical factory that made pills and put them in a bottle, and now you have individualized medicines that can be created for people based on their
I think
own
you're right. It was some of those discoveries.
DNA. So
this is what she's talking about tomorrow night. Do you want to tell them about it?
our life science forum?
Yeah.
Yep, so our life science forum, tomorrow night, 6 p.m.
Where?
Main hearing room of the town hall. It will also be broadcast live on Facebook, BCAT Facebook Live. But you won't be able to ask questions to the panelists.
Right.
And our panelists, we have a panelist from Northeastern University, the Associate Teaching Process and Director. He's in charge of quite a bit of kind of the regulatory process and setting up all the labs in Northeastern. And that's Dr. Jared O'Clair. We have Daniel St. Clair, who's Managing Director of Spalding and Sly Investments, who's had a long history with this region and can tell us a lot about really the industry and the evolution of the industry and the space needs within kind of life science and office, and just what does this look like, feel like, what kind of shape it's taking. We have Ed Parsons, who's a resident of Burlington, who is a physicist trained, but in the life science consulting, who I have just met because he is on the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. So I think he'll be an excellent addition to the panel. And we have Dr. Weiner from the Board of Health. who can give us a very detailed history of kind of where Burlington has been, where we are, as well as he has a long personal history in biotech.
Dr. Weiner and I parenthetically share not only a high school, but the town that we both came from. I met him. He's anyway, this is well worth the time tomorrow night between 6 and 7:30. I'm sure you will learn quite a bit from these people. That's true.
No,
Were you responsible for this?
Yes, I
Good
put
for
together
you.
the forum. But the forum is partially, I mean, the timeliness is because of the amendment to the Warren article. However, this forum is really designed to explain what is life science, where are we, where's the industry going. It's not going word by word through the warrant. I will certainly do that at town meeting, but this is really a panel for people in the residents and
It's an opening
business
discussion
community
in that for
to
that
understand,
field,
life science, what's happening in the region, and why it's important to be thinking about in Burlington.
Wow. Thank you. You've covered a lot of ground. We have any one given company in town, and we know that they are doing research in a particular area, life science research, dealing with chemicals. Dr. Weiner comes in, and I'm sure he has something to say with regard to how those chemicals are controlled. Somebody has to oversee them. Initially, are these companies required to show in any way what they plan or what they're doing, or is this something that the health department and I guess what I'm asking is, how do you work with the health department, and how does the health department work?
So we have uses are either by right, or they're either no, yes, or which is yes was by right, which still requires site plan review, and then there's special permit uses. For much of the life science industry and biotechnology industry, there's many special permits that people need to get between just the lab special permit in general, then the hazardous materials storage, the Board of Health oversees hazardous materials, as well as RDNA biotechnology uses, which they need a permit from the Board of Health. So really, if you watched our last planning board meeting, and you'll hear the planning board say a lot, is for these types of uses, the professional staff that works in town is the professional staff of the Board of Health staff, as well as the Board of Health themselves. So much of their oversight and commenting within our special permit process, as well as their own process, goes through the Board of Health. So we jointly do quite a bit of review for any of these type of uses.
Is the fire department in any way?
Yes.
They are notified of the...
The fire department is a commenting department for us. So any permit that comes through goes to the fire department, goes to all of the departments I mentioned.
They have to approve it.
They have to comment.
Okay.
And if they disapprove, then the applicant would need to work with the Board of Health. But they have their own registrations for hazardous materials and other things. So
Have there been disapprovals that you can recall
within
offhand?
life science,
Yeah.
not that I can
I mean, the
recall.
kind of research they're doing.
No.
And does the state have anything to say with regard to a company that is doing very sensitive research in terms of materials that could be contaminated?
So in general, Burlington has prohibited the National Institute of Health Biosafety Level 4 labs, which are any labs that would have materials that would be of harm to the general public.
So when they come here, you hand them, or someone hands them?
It's just
that?
directly in our bio. You can't have a level 4 lab. I mean,
Yeah, but how do they
there's
know?
probably 5 level 4 labs in the country. I mean,
Are they
they're
aware
highly
of it before
rare.
they got here generally?
It's
Or who
written-
makes them aware of it?
written directly in the bylaw, and then through a lot of the other oversight. I mean, what we talked about quite a bit, I had a conference call with the panel for last night, or yesterday afternoon, and one of the main topics that we want to talk about is really the safety of biotech and this kind of 1980s biotechnology kind of fears really are not realized with the way life science is, one, regulated from a federal, local, and individualized perspective within the building itself, and with the the materials themselves are regulated in some forms. That the panel yesterday said overall there is no safety concern for a life science industry, but really that's an education piece. We need to make sure that we get out to the public as well as any policymakers.
Announce the kind of any one particular company, if they're not manufacturing a specific item or a medication or whatnot, they're doing research. Do they have to announce exactly what they're doing, the process to Dr. Weiner in particular?
So I'm not going to speak for the Board of Health, but I know that they request any and all list of kind of material listings, as well as processes. Kristin Mathis and the Board of Health does a ton of research on kind of the certain process that are in place, and I would recommend that you have her on at with Ed Weiner.
Parenthetically, he is on my list. I've had him once on the show, and he is, both he and Dr. Saltzman, I think he is, yeah.
Yeah, no, and they're excellent members of the Board of Health. And the fact that Burlington has an environmental engineer, I think points to the leadership in the Board of Health years ago in terms of, some of these industries from the 50s and 60s weren't regulated environmentally like they are today. And the need to have environmental oversight in Burlington is terrific, and, really keeping an eye on kind of older industry and remediation, and just to have that person on staff here is good.
Wow. We've covered about 20 miles.
It's probably only like 8. It's either 8:15 or like almost 9.
This is, but I have to ask this question. I think I can see it in the way are you happy with your job?
On most days, yes.
On those days when things don't go quite right, you have a little bit, but for the most part.
Well, things are exciting. I mean, they're dynamic and they're exciting, and they keep you interested. But with dynamic and exciting and a lot of personalities, you have. Yeah. Everyone has days. But overall, I think the direction that Burlington has been in, the people that are involved, the planning board members that we've worked with have been.
You're almost an honorary citizen of Burlington.
I tell a lot of people I've probably spent more hours here than at home in my 17 years here. But no, I think we're lucky to have the relationships that we have in town. And I hope that people recognize that between the business community, between the departments themselves, and between the active residents that are here in town. You mentioned earlier that how many people are watching, and I hope a lot of people are watching. But
I do too. You're missing a lot of good stuff if you're not.
Just like other towns. I mean, you have town meeting, which is, I think having an elected town meeting is fantastic. I don't even know how people do anything at open town meeting. But representative town meeting, I think, is again another policy decision that the town of Burlington made that I think has changed the course. And I think, I'm a fan of representative town meeting. But you have a handful of people that are super involved, and you have a whole bunch of people that just go there day by day and really don't know what's going on, and that's fine. One of the biggest challenges we had with the master plan is how do we reach people that don't reach out or don't tune in or don't. And we've had a lot of success through the master plan process with our master plan Facebook page, and we initially we started putting, fun facts and kind of questions that we were going to kind of the truck day, and we were going to. It's not Pride. Celebrate Burlington Day. It used to be Pride Day.
Yep.
And it was excellent. Just talking to people that we hadn't talked to very much. Mostly, new families with young kids. I mean, totally busy. I know.
How do you get them involved?
Yeah.
How do you get them to
you
be
know,
aware of what you're
I
doing?
have a 3-year-old, and I'm here all the. I could tell you more about Burlington politics than anything going on where I live. But you know, I try to be involved. But you just you know, I encourage more and more people to be involved. By understand why they're not. But even in small ways, and I think as part of the master plan process, we had a lot of people get involved in small ways, but really change the trajectory of kind of the message. And I think that's been great. And having a community conversation over the last 4 years, I think has brought me to a place personally that I wasn't at before we started the master plan process. And we spent a lot of time with developers and permitting, but really having that resident conversation to answer the question of really where is Burlington going, I feel, and we'll have the master plan done so we can have it all written soon, I hope. But I don't know, I feel like I have a much better sense than I did a few years back before we started, on kind of just general on the street feelings of what's happening.
From my perspective, and I have not been as active in terms of participating as I perhaps should be.
You have a show for the public. You're doing a great job.
Yes. How many people see it? I think you know that they replay this over the weekend 3 or 4 times, this program, and then it goes up on YouTube. So it's out there, and eventually, by a month from now or 2 months from now, quite a few people will have seen it, undoubtedly. How many of them actually pay attention and get something out of it, especially the message of perhaps trying to participate? It has been my experience that the participation rate here in Burlington is pretty good. It's not wonderful, it's pretty good. And I say that based on neighbors that I've talked to and people. Of course, I'm in a particular group, and the other thing is that I've been in town for a long, long time, so that I'm perhaps a little bit more aware of. And I do know a lot of people who simply, as you say, tune out. They do their own thing, and they're not interested in getting involved in it. The master plan, you started with this 10 years ago?
No, not that long ago.
Well, this is not your first.
Well, this is the first major overhaul of the master plan.
Okay.
The last time we did a master plan was the 90s, between 93 and 98.
I remember the talk about it.
So this is our first, I campaigned town meeting for a couple of years before I actually started the process to get the funding. We started 2014. I hate to say it, but we started 2014.
Why do you hate to say it?
It's just been a long time, but we're so busy. Had some jokes about just how long it's been taking, but honestly, right now we're at the last phase of commenting and really trying to pull together everything, and it's been great to take all of that information and really try to
Condense
make it right. And I will say that I'm probably suffering a little bit from,
Anxiety?
the perfection's the enemy of good. I just need to get it out there. But just really wanted the message to be right and to make sure that we include the multiple and dynamic conversations that we've had over the years.
Is this a document?
It is.
Okay.
It's 2 documents.
Is it
summary and main document? But
a big document?
Yes.
Okay. And one copy of it is going to be filed with the Historical Society.
I would
think. Yeah, I would think that they would want one too. I can't even imagine how you bring it all together. It's got to be a lot of work and a lot of research.
It is. In our steering committee was terrific, and I've said it on town meeting a couple times that I think that committee is one of the best committees that I've worked with.
I'm not on it.
We have an implementation committee that we need to appoint sometime over the next month or so. So there's still time.
Okay.
But the steering committee has been great, and I hope that through the involvement in the process that everyone involved kind of has come out of it with at least seeing kind of the bigger picture of
Burlington,
how things interrelate and how things push and pull, and how balance is the whole name of the game. It's how do you balance all this stuff.
But it shows growth.
But just the dynamics of what's happening and balancing the goals with pressures and market pressures and forces, and how do you preserve and grow all at the same time with keeping things stable, vibrant, and meaningful.
That's
and
hard
so
to do.
And how do you increase? A lot of the conversation we had was cultural diversity, but cultural resources, art, public art. I don't know if you've had Jonathan Sachs on your show, but
I've had him.
He's been a champion of public art in Burlington. I think that's fantastic. I mean, a lot of communities around us showcase a lot of kind of the art and design and public
I think
spaces.
he's had his request approved. His sculpture park that he wanted to put together.
I know we've had
I think it's been approved.
a
I'm not
wonderful
sure.
amount of conversation, but those type of conversations that were not happening.
Right.
Not necessarily not before the master plan, but it brought in these discussions to the larger group, and it's you take this whole and you start plugging in the pieces that are important.
Right.
So it's important just to have awareness of what are those pieces.
Yeah.
And
A town that is exclusively business is missing a lot. There has to be a cultural aspect, and make it visible if possible.
right. Well, and it's there. I mean, you have the Burlington players that are fantastic, but how do we, show people it's here, it's great? How do we kind of help foster evolution and growth within cultural resources in Burlington? They started the Diwali festival, which is wonderful on the Common. So
Do you, how are we doing for time? Can you see anything? Where are we here with Frank? 1 minute? Are you serious? We need another hour. Oh my God, I was afraid of that. Kristin, I so much. All I have time for is to say thank you. And come back.
you'll come to the forum tomorrow night.
I am. I'm
Main
planning on
hearing
it.
room.
I will.
Everybody, come to the forum.
Come to the forum tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Once again, 6 to 7:30. Extremely valuable information with regard to Burlington and what is happening, especially with regard to life science and the overall picture of what's happening in Burlington. Well worth the effort. Please come tomorrow night. I definitely will be there.